For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
Well, welcome back to Dunkin' Donuts. Craig, what are you enjoying this evening?
I am going to be having a Boston cream.
Hey, Craig, is that a Welshman over there in the corner?
Oh, you can spot him a mile away. That's Owen.
Hey, how's it going, boys?
Welcome to Dunkin' Donuts, Owen.
Oh, it's great in here, isn't it? It's great in here. I just slipped on some jam on the floor there.
Oh,
but I'm here. Yeah,
Yeah,
jelly over here. I can't call it jam.
Yeah,
right.
it's jelly.
Now, what is your favorite? Do you have donuts in Wales?
Pardon?
Do you have donuts in Wales?
Right. That's it. I'm leaving.
I don't know.
Where do you think I'm from?
I don't
Where do you think
know.
I'm from the past or something? Cost of donuts in Wales. We buy bags of 10 for £1 or £1 in Tesco or Sainsbury's. We invented donuts here in Wales.
Well, I stand corrected. Then. So, since coming then from the land which donuts were invented, which I did not know, you learn something every day.
You do.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah, I'm surprised there's a dragon's on your flag. Shouldn't it be a donut?
You got donuts in Wales. You think I just got off the banana boat or something? Here I am.
So now, what is your favorite donut?
My favourite donut would be a strawberry jam donut covered in sugar. Thick sugar.
Now,
but
yeah.
eaten on a plate alongside a side dish of Joe's ice cream, which is a special South Wales delicacy.
Oh, ice cream and donut. I don't think I've ever heard of that before.
Oh, yeah. When next we meet in Dunkin' Donuts, I will bring some Joe's ice cream with me just to put on a soup song on the side of your plate like that.
Oh, soup song.
That sounds fantastic. I shall.
Going to put a soup song on the side of your plate.
Song.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
Excellent.
He went all French on you.
He did right. See,
A soup song on the plate.
never ceases to amaze. So,
Yeah.
I thought it'd be fun. You know, why don't we? Since we're here in Dunkin' Donuts, let's talk about. And we have a great storyteller with us and a story writer in Craig. Let's talk about games, which tell stories. Games that sort of inspire us, or while playing them, a story builds, or maybe that you tell great stories about a particular session of a game because it's just such a great experience. The game itself builds a tale. I thought we kind of go around, each of us mention a game that we thought comes to mind when we think about games that build stories. And I shall start just to get the ball rolling.
Why don't you do that?
Now I'm gonna make for the first category here because there's sort of an obvious answer to this. Okay, I just want to kind of get this out there and and that is any role-playing game.
Right.
Okay, so obviously the king of all storytelling games, in my humble opinion, is the role-playing game.
I would almost say that can't count.
It really can't. That's why I'm just throwing it out here now, getting it out of the way because basically you're literally building a story together.
Right.
And I just love that about RPGs. But we got to take them off the table because that's kind of obvious, and we could list RPGs all day here. But I'm thinking more shorter time period games that require less preparation that also build an excellent story.
Right.
All right. So do you guys have any ideas you want to throw in, or should I start with my first one?
I thought you were.
start with it.
Okay. I was going to cheat and take RPGs, so I did that. All right. So I'll go with this one. I really like this one a lot, Owen. I don't know if you're familiar with this one. It's called Once Upon a Time. Have you heard of this game?
No.
So it is a card. It's a card game, and what it is that in this deck of cards there are places and people, and there'll be a card that says castle, and a card that says the prince, and the card that says a frog or a giant or a harp, and you have this deck of cards, and you deal a number of cards out to each player, and then the first player starts telling a story, and they're trying to name cards they have in the hand. So they might say, once upon a time, there was a prince, and they put down a prince. And the prince traveled along a road, and he might put down a road card. And when he got to the road, he passed by a cave, but then you, Owen, might say, wait, I have the cave card. And so you put the cave down, because he happened to say cave and you have it in your hand. You put cave down, and now you, Owen, can continue the story from what I left it off. And you keep playing. Now, if at any time you either go completely crazy off the rails of the story, or you simply stuck, and then the other players can call you out and say, "Oh, you're stuck," And if you get stuck, you draw a card, and play goes to your left, and the next player continues the story from where you are. And the goal is to work through your entire hand of cards. But in addition to a hand of cards, each player also gets one ending card. And the goal is to drive the story to an ending you can play that makes sense. What do you think of that?
It's similar. I've got a set of story cards that I use for storytelling when I go to schools and things like that to teach children about building narrative and characters and that type of thing. It's very, very similar to that. But my cards are not a game. There's no rules as such.
Yeah, that's cool. So how do you do that? Do you just bring cards out and sort of teach impromptu storytelling?
Yeah, well, what I do with that is, I'll have a group of, say, 5 or 6 kids who all sat around the table. I will give them, they randomly pick cards from the hand, which they're all similar cards. They've got like the Prince, the Frog, the Wicked Witch, the Isle of the Mermaids, all this type of thing. And that they then choose them, and I ask them to create a story using the cards that they've got, and they're allowed certain swaps. So if something doesn't quite fit, they can swap it for another card, and so on. And then they each perform their story at the end then. So that's
nice.
where it's not a game as such, but it's like a storytelling sort of exercise, Yeah,
that's cool. That's what this game basically is, and you can play any number of players. And I've tried it with younger kids too at my daughter's birthday parties, and they really enjoy it. It's a fun little game. And this is produced, it's called Once Upon a Time, and it's produced by Asmodee, and in the U.S., I think it's Atlas Games that does it. So if you're interested in that one, check that one out.
Okay. I will check that out, actually, yeah. The ones I've got are called the storytelling cards by a guy called John Matthews, and they're beautifully illustrated. And you could play the same game with that, by the look of it. You'd have to decide on what the end cards were.
Oh, fair enough. So, who would like to go next?
I think Owen should go next.
Oh, look,
thank you.
Throwing him right into the
much.
Bus, meet Owen. Owen, meet Bus. I just told a story.
Well, mine, it's funny with mine, is that I spent years and years and years being a GM or a DM or a ref, whatever you want to call it, in role-playing games. Role-playing games are a funny thing. For me, they've always been a way to create a story, to get characters involved in a story, to play different characters, to actually get out there and create new narratives. But it's something you've always got to tailor, isn't it? Because some people will come and play the role-playing game to create a character and mash their skills together and be quite analytical about it. Others will just want to roll some dice and have some fun. So role-playing games can be a very funny thing when playing a story, trying to create stories with them. But what I've got is sort of memories. And one of the earliest memories I've got is going to a war games club years and years ago when I was about 11, 12 years old, and playing a game of Warhammer. And the guy who turned up on that day, he had a beautiful set of scenery. It was all over the board, lovely scratch-built buildings. There was a river in the middle of it. And the battle was, there were a load of dwarves in this town that was being besieged by a load of orc and goblins. And I just turned up. I was a young kid. I didn't have anything at all. And he sat me down and he taught me the game. And all I can remember about that game is I can't remember anything at all that happened in the game, but all I can remember is the visuals in my head of... I was commanding some goblin wolf riders, and they were rampaging through the river and coming up the bank at the other side, and the dwarves were firing arrows at them, and the goblins got into the town, and the dwarves broke and ran up the other side. And the way the story just formed in my head was just brilliant, and I think sometimes the stories come when you're not looking for them, when you actually just go into a game and let your imagination run wild. And I think that's what gaming's all about, really. And that, for me, is one of my biggest sort of storytelling experiences, even though it wasn't a storytelling game.
Nice. Well, that's great. And yeah, I have many memories of Warhammer also inspiring storytelling moments. Craig, do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I was actually going to say my first thing was going to be miniatures games, because whenever I'm playing any miniatures game and enjoying myself, there's a story that's developing in my head. And I love 40K and fantasy for that, because you, from the ground up, pretty much, unless you're using special characters, you've created everybody that's taking part. So you've equipped them, you've given them their abilities, you basically have been in on their construction, their creation. They're your characters for the most part. And I just love playing those games and watching the stories unfold. And they happen pretty much every time I play what I would consider like a really good miniatures game that I would go to again and again. The newer ones like Malifaux and War Machine, I can't connect to as much on that level because they're not my characters. They're all pretty much characters that exist, and that I mean, it's neat because you're watching their story develop, which is cool, but there's not as much ownership of it. So I really prefer, from a storytelling point of view, my favorite is when we used to do these all the time, when we used to do those mega battles at DACA, or a campaign that, like a story campaign, which we haven't done in a very long time, but where you have the characters and you've got the armies and they're there for a specific purpose and they're allied with. I mean, the last time I ran something like that, I was still living in the apartment in Nashua, for God's sake, and I mean, I remember I had a blast with that, and I had a map that only I knew everything. I was running it, so I wasn't playing in it, and I had a map that only I knew where everything was. And it was basically a fog of war scenario, and Russ, you played in it, and your brother played. I mean, we had basically it was the old guard, and we played in that. I made a whole map, and there was highways, and I made all the terrain for it. So every time we got together and had a game, like the terrain on the game board was specifically detailed by where you are on the map, but you didn't really know, like, was this all of the forces they had in the territory that you're facing, or was there a giant army right behind the one that, like, this week you have to face them, and you had like a 500 point advantage, yay, but then you find out that their 3,000 point army was like right behind, and now they know where you are, and so it really was fun and exciting for me. And I used to do weekly little newspaper articles that would like be like, oh, what's happening on the war front today, and I just had a blast with the map and the special effects, and that was my first foray with Photoshop Publisher. I remember I was using like really high tech. I don't know where I got it, but I don't have it anymore. But I had all kinds of cool layout and design tools at my disposal for the map and for the little newsletters that I did, and I had a blast with that. And I haven't done that in a long time, and I'm just thinking about that now, of how much fun I had with that. But it takes so much time and effort. Yeah, that's the key.
I think that's the key to it, isn't it? And
yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is sort of memory, really, and going back to those days when you just first started gaming. And like you said there, and I think the fantastic thing about miniature gaming is when you forget it's a miniature game. Yeah. When you actually, no matter how much effort you put into the figures, into the terrain, into the scenery, all you get is the pictures in your head, which replace the miniatures. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, definitely.
Yeah, to this day, I remember that campaign, and I just had a blast with that campaign.
Yeah, definitely the stories that come in miniature games are fantastic, and I remember those games too, Craig. And even when we played in the league, several of us would write up little stories about our games afterwards and share them on the forums, and it was just a lot of fun to. And you're right, to create your own characters like a little RPG. But even now, I get back to a little bit like I'm doing those little comic book things.
Yeah.
You just see the story unfold, and you remember that time that that whole thing happened, and it's just a lot of fun. And miniature games are so visual. I think they call out for that story.
What? Okay. Speaking of storytelling and being in a league situation where, do you remember we were still at the Wizards Tower, and Jeff Brooks was playing with us for, I think, the first time, and he created a Blood Angels-esque kind of army, but his Blood Angels weren't using blood; they were using some kind of chemical stimulant, so they were really tainted. And I was using the Divine Wind, super loyal Space Marines, and we would write these long stories, and we built this rivalry that our commanders hated each other, and he started. I think he started taking it a little personally, and then he like turned the stories around. So like, I think our commanders should start to like. Should start to like talk to each other, and we literally had a league game set up. And we set the whole game up, and then he looked across the table, and his models were always ridiculously gorgeous. And we had good terrain, the models were set up, the whole game was set up, and he said, "My commander walks to the center of the field, and all of my men put down their guns." I was like, seriously? Are we gonna do this? Because this is a league game, and it kind of counts.
Right.
And he was like, no, I will not fight you, my brother. And then he turned every one of his models so that their backs were facing me. And he was like, if you must kill us, then kill us, for we believe in you. I was like, oh, God damn it. And so I was like, okay, fine. My guys all put their guns down too. And literally, and we did not, it was a draw. We did not fight that
awesome.
league battle.
I'd forgotten about that. That's fantastic. What a great story.
That's always been in my head too, as a high point of storytelling, if not league points.
That is awesome.
But that goes back to what you were saying, Craig. I mean, you created your own Space Marine chapters. The difference of the Blood Angels. I think there's a lot of that in gaming, and these days we sort of force-fed characters and situations, really. And I think sometimes the imagination of the storytelling is a little bit lost. Like, I've started playing Hordes and War Machine in the last couple of years, probably since I last spoke to you, and I love the game, but I never get that feeling with that, like you said, because the characters aren't your own, and because the game is so sort of complex, with its the synergies and things like that you don't get the time to let your imagination go or the vision. Sometimes when the game is looser, the story is stronger.
Yep.
Good point.
That's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, to be fair to Games Workshop, they've always stressed that our games are, in the beginning, and now they've changed a little bit, but they were, our games are not competitive. It's about building a story, and so that. I think you guys are onto something there, because you're right. Those are probably some of the strongest storytelling memories I have, too, from playing miniature games or their stuff.
Yep. So, Russ, why don't you go ahead and take us away from miniatures, because clearly that's what Owen and I want to talk about. So why don't you
No, you keep going.
Tear us away from that and give us another card game, you bastard.
All right, fine. I will. So this one is by the same company. They must have a theme. And it's called Gloom. Have you guys played Gloom?
Are you getting paid?
I know, I've heard of them.
What's that?
I've heard of it, but I haven't played it.
So Gloom what makes Gloom interesting is it's translucent cards. Okay, so you start with a character, and the deal with Gloom is you each play a family of people who are miserable, okay, and murderous and basically evil. Now, your goal is to die the most miserable. So you want your family members to die off. And what's interesting is you can place these clear cards on top of your people's cards or other people's cards, and it adds them. So you always see, based on the clear card, sort of the photo of your character and their name at the top. And as you put things on them, it'll say, like, Mary Bell is miserable because she has smallpox, right? And so then I can put something on top that says, but then she gets happy because she's cured, and so I can make your people happier. But what's neat about this is, as these cards stack, sort of their history of what happens to them stacks. And so you build these little awful histories of each family member, and finally you can say, she was married, but then she got broken up, and she became so sad she died of a broken heart. You finally killed her off. So you're trying to kill them off when they're not happy. And it's just neat because there's this whole story around each character as you play through it.
I've never played, but I've heard, and I've heard you talk about it and enjoy it.
It is fun, and it builds a little story. So it's not quite as creative as like Once Upon a Time, where you're literally making the story. You're just kind of watching a story unfold about the characters, and it's pretty humorous to see the different turns and twists that the stories take. So I like that one.
Oh, it's nice, but getting away from going back to role-playing games, which essentially are storytelling games. I love the way that when a game is simple, like Savage Worlds or the new Dragon Age role-playing game. That's a really nice, simple system that keeps you in the story. I mean, years and years ago, I remember playing with a group of friends a D&D second edition campaign, and it was the old Forgotten Realms one, which I can't remember the name of the story, but it was to do with the gods falling to Earth, or to the Forgotten Realms. The party, we just had like a glorious party where one member drew all lovely pictures of all the characters we were playing, and another did a map of the sort of campaign area, and everyone just put the effort in, and it was brilliant. And I remember one of the characters died. The character's name was Darin, and he was a wizard, and he died by falling into this gorge towards the end of the campaign, where one of the gods had like cast him down into this gorge, and he died. But in doing so, he broke a bridge that an evil army couldn't get across. And years later, I went to a friend's house, the friend who played that character, and he had the Forgotten Realms map. And there he'd written, and he'd drawn the bridge on the map. And next to it, in like sort of calligraphy, he'd written Darin Gorge. His name, it had such an effect on him that it was like 5 or 6 years later, and he was still thinking about it. It was tremendous, that was.
We have role-playing games leave such a mark on you. It's kind of funny. Like, we had a game we used to play back in high school with one of my friends, and to this day, one of his characters died, because he had suggested that we sleep on a wall at this fort. And so, of course, we got attacked. We're on the wall, and he died there. And to this day, 25, 30, whatever it is years later, we get together, and we're ever in a situation where, like, doing something stupid, the line is, to me, to do something stupid, he wanted to go sleep on a wall. It lived with him his entire life. It's just hilarious. So it's great.
Yeah.
It's just great how these things stick with you, and they're like stories you'd have from a real adventure in your life, but they're just from these awesome storytelling adventures from RPGs.
Yeah, it's weird, and some of it can be silly. Like there was a friend of mine, and in that same system, they were fighting a beholder, and he shouted out, "The round one's mine." And to this day, we still, every time I see him, I say, "The round one's mine." He so loves it. And the same guy, he played, even silliness, like fun stuff from out of it. He played a really smartly dressed elf character called Ralph Lauren, which he thought was hilarious, which was really annoying at the time, but I still remember it, as being like a really good, fun thing. And I think that's just all about, is like building fun, building stories, really.
Nice. Craig, what, you got another story?
Well, I mean, I always, it's not so much a story, but I remember when we were playing in John's D&D campaign that lasted forever, and Derek had that halfling paladin, interestingly enough.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I like them.
And he named his horse Foot.
Yes.
Just so he could go into town, and if somebody ever asked him how he got there, he could say, "I got here on foot." And that was the strangest joke that anyone ever built into character creation, and then just got a kick out of any chance he could get to say that he got to town on foot. And
nice.
and I never really thought it was that funny, but he got a huge kick out of it. So there you go.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to keep going down my game list, but you guys keep telling these great tales of yore because they're awesome. I love them.
Tales of yore.
I love it. Tales of yore. That's you can use that for your next album, Owen. That's fine.
Tales of yore.
Tales of yore. See, it's got a ring.
Tales of yore. Of war and yore.
All right, I'm going to skip ahead. Another genre of game I really like, and it definitely doesn't do the kind of things for you that like a Warhammer does or role playing games do. But I also like the 4X games, the ones where you expand and explore and exploit.
Really?
Yeah, for storytelling, because you get these stories of history. Like, remember the time that I built aircraft with guns and you still had horses, kind of thing, and civ and stuff. So I just really like the alternate histories that come out of them, and the sort of the story of the battles that occurred and how you defeated your opponent and how timeline shifted. Is that just weird?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is weird, but I can see it. Yeah, I can see it.
That exact same experience to me would not be a story. It would be, remember that time you got your tech tree working and I don't like tech trees, so you crushed me?
Or that. Yes, that's fine. Still a story.
It would be a story. Just not quite the same story.
Different story. So I like 4X games. Now, not as much, they're not as strong storytelling as, say, Craig, I think you should talk a little bit about the one above that there.
The one above that. Battlestar Galactica is that's a weird one though for storytelling. Yeah, you're not like building a narrative, but what you get are some really crazy stories from your games of Battlestar Galactica. Like the one time that you were at your really good friend's house and two of his mutual friends that don't really like each other were playing and needling each other constantly throughout the night, and none of us knew that there was this meta relationship going on and that we were all being manipulated by these two guys that didn't really like each other. And we were all playing, you're playing Battlestar Galactica. So you're thinking, you're throwing around toaster, you're a toaster, he's a Cylon. And nobody's thinking any deeper than that. But what was happening was we were all being used by one guy against this other guy who convinced us all that he was a Cylon. And he was like, no, it's him, I know, because I used the cards, so I know exactly what happened. And we were all like, oh my God, get him in the brig. And the poor guy was not a Cylon. He was the victim of this passive-aggressive guy who was like just needling him all night long. And he ended up in the brig, and he was like, I am not playing this game unless you get me out of the brig. And it got really, really angry, as if we had really locked him in a brig.
Wow.
And I mean, it got so intense, and he was like, I'm telling you right now what I'm doing. I am going to make sure that you fail every test that we have to do as long as I'm in the brig. Like, all I can do is put one card in. I'm telling you what it's going to be. It's a 6 off color. And he would just throw him down. And we'd be like, seriously, we can't. And he's like, yeah, you're not going to be able to pass a single skill check until you get me out of the brig. And I've never seen anybody that angry in a board game environment before, and it was intriguing. And to this day we talk about that, and we talk about the Battlestar Galactica game where half of our friends were completely wasted at TempleCon.
Drunken Battlestar, yeah.
Drunk Battlestar is not something I would recommend, especially if you're not one of the drunk ones. Because now it's just more frustrating Battlestar, especially if one of the drunk ones was the guy who set the game up, so you've got extra Cylons involved. So, yeah that was intriguing. But I love Battlestar Galactica because of those stories that that emerge from the gaming experiences, because it's such a social game, which I think if you look at some of the other things you have there, Russ, I would say these social games really lend themselves to that kind of story where you don't really building a narrative in your head with characters and everything. It's more of a story that's some funny thing that happened with you and your friends that you tell over and over again throughout, into the future, where whenever you get together, these are the stories that you talk about. Like Werewolf, and I think Werewolf has some really funny moments. Where we've played in different places and different conventions, and you remember that sort of thing. So yeah, these social games. But Battlestar. But the one thing I'll always remember about Battlestar is the first time Karen ever played, when she got her loyalty card and went, I don't understand what this Cylon thing means.
Yes. Took a bit of training on that one.
It did. Especially considering she loves being the traitor in any game that has a traitor, and so she was really bent out of shape that she did that. But
how about you, Owen? You got another storytelling moment there, Owen?
Yeah, I think with games, any game like the ones that Craig's been on about there, any game that gets you telling the story of the game long after the gaming experience is finished is worth its weight, isn't it? That's what storytelling's all about. If it's the times when you're driving in your car, you're going to work, things aren't too good or whatever, or you're sat at home alone, and you think about a game and you chuckle, then that's what the gaming experience is all about. And if it creates that story in your mind, then it's succeeded no matter what you play. You could play, hide and seek, I suppose. And, you come up with loads of stories about the time, I hid in the cupboard and I couldn't get out for 3 days. That's just all about, isn't it? And any game can create that. And even though role-playing games are essentially about creating stories, you can create as many stories with a board game or a war game or whatever you want to play, really. Even computer games, when you're playing on with online, or even years ago when you and your friend used to play, the Gauntlet together at home and things like that. You get so many fond memories about it. It's just anything, really, isn't it?
It is. And you mentioned, Owen, earlier, you said how sometimes the simpler RPGs and the simpler rule sets lend themselves more to stories. And I was just thinking about, I mentioned the show a couple times recently. I've been teaching my daughter the Fairy's Tale RPG we've been playing in. And this game couldn't have a simpler rule set, really. It's very simple. There's only 3 stats. You basically roll a number of dice equal to your stat score, and you're hoping for even numbers, and every even number counts as a success. Very simple game. And she now is playing as the narrator, and we've got all these great stories already, and they run around, and they talk about, the niece and nephews are over, and they play these stories, and they talk about the time that their chipmunk farted and all these crazy adventures they've had. And it's just wonderful to see, and it's just the simplest. It's almost like you said, it's almost like the simpler the rule sets in many ways, the more the imagination comes in.
Right.
It totally. I mean, years and years ago, going back in the mists of time now, we used to play MERP, the Middle Earth role-playing game.
Yeah.
And that had that was a spin-off from a system called Rollmaster. I don't know if you remember that. But the books for that were like a maths textbook. It was just unbelievably complicated, wasn't it? And then when you found the original D&D second edition, which was so much simpler, it was brilliant for me to actually sort of get into that. But then they brought out all those books, the Thief's Handbook, the Bard's Handbook, all these type of things. So every character had his own rule book, and in the end, it just all spirals out of control, doesn't it? I sometimes wish. I know that's how the gaming companies make their money, but keep it simple and let the imaginations do the work, and then you get the essence of a brilliant role-playing game.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
And I think that's why you're probably seeing a little bit of resurgence, some of those too, like the role-playing game Fiasco, or Cosmic Patrol, these very, very simple RPG games that really just throw out a lot of keywords and say, have at it.
Yeah. Well, the Savage World.
Yeah, Savage World, yep.
And the Serenity/Firefly system.
They're very straightforward, which is great. I think that's fun to go back to that and be more focused on keywords and character creation and story development and less focused on, very, very cool in tactical miniature combat, but that's maybe a different kind of game, right?
I think it's all about the player, though, isn't it, as well?
It is, really is, yeah.
I mean, I used to play in a group, and there was one guy who just absolutely loved the maths bashing and the power play, if you like. And it was great to have him there, I mean, when you're all around the table, it just, as long as you get everyone's mixing together, it doesn't matter what you get. But
that's a good
for
point.
Me, it's all about, the story more than anything.
Yeah.
Because I could never learn the rules anyway. I was always the DM.
So another game that I have really fond memories of, and it is all about the story, is Zombicide. So this game is really, even the visual part of this game, the rules are really simple, and it's a co-op game, right? So you've got these plastic miniatures, and it's cool mini or not. So you got tons of these plastic zombies, and what's great about the game is as you're playing it, you're seeing literally 50 or 60 plastic zombies coming towards you on the board, just filling the streets. And it's so visual. Again, it gets to the miniature game mode where you're so visual that, as you said earlier, Owen, you start to forget. And the mechanics are so simple. You start to forget that you're actually in the middle of a game. And you're just like, oh, my God, I'm looking down the street at 30 zombies, and my back's to my car. And so you can get in the car and and there was one scene, Randy and I were playing, and everybody else had died. It was just me and Randy. And we got all the objectives. We had to get off the board. And we had 3 moves left. So I backed the car up, rode over 3 zombies. I'm like, come with me if you want to live. Get in the car. And so Randy jumps in the car, and we drove over 10 zombies in the way. I had to make all the right rolls and just drove off into the sunset. It was such an awesome, classic end of a zombie movie scene. It was we talk about that ending now over and over again. It's one of our favorite epic game endings of all time. It's just those kind of games where, and again, when it's sometimes it's nice about the co-op games, sometimes when it's you against the game, it just lends itself to the fact that you are building a story because there's really not beating anyone else, right? It's just you against the story of the game or building the story. And so I think those kind of games really, if you're in the right mood, you can really have a fun story with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Well, you just told a story there, didn't you? And I mean, the fact that that's left that impression on you is all what a story's about, really. It doesn't matter what happened in the game. You've got that vision in your head, and all of a sudden that's the experience, which is tremendous.
Yeah. And there's, you guys got any more? I got one more.
Okay, go for it.
So this one is really weird. Owen, do you remember the Make Your Own Adventure books?
Of course I do, yeah.
So the ones where you'd read them and it would say you've come to the end of a cave tunnel with a fork in it, and in the left tunnel,
the fighting fantasy game books.
Yeah, right. And it would say if you go left, you might face a snake, but if you go right, you might face a sphinx. If you choose to go left, turn to page 40, but if you choose to go right, turn to page 35. And so you're supposed to not look ahead. You turn to page 35, and oh no, the snake attacks you. And then you have these choices, and it takes you to the book, and it's kind of choose your own path, right? These were huge in the 80s. I don't know if they're still around.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying they're reprinting them all now, and I've gone back to a few, and they're just as cool. They're great. Yeah,
fun. So there's actually, did you know there's a board game based on that concept called Tales of Arabian Nights? Have you heard of this?
No.
So this board game, it was a classic board game. It got reprinted, I want mid 2000s, 2000. Well, since we've been doing the show, so I would say 2009 or 2010, they reprinted this game. And basically, so it's the Arabian Nights, and each of you plays a hero. And the thing about this game is, there is a way to win, but that's not really important. What happens is you walk around and you go over this game board and things happen to you, and it'll say, you'll get a card and it'll say would you like to, there's a princess there. Would you like to trust her or suspect her of being evil? What would you like to do? And then you do that. And then there's this massive book, almost a dictionary sized book. And it says, turn to page 85. And you read this page and a half or something, really long description of what happens to you. It's she turns out to be a genie, and she curses you, and then this happens, and you get these cards and these traits on your character, and then you go and you actually build this life story of your character from this time where he was cursed by a genie, and then he married a princess, but then he had to go to battle in a war and lost his left arm, and you have this whole story you build around your character all through this game, and really. You can win and lose, but that's not even what it's about. It's about just seeing the story, and when it's not your turn, you're listening to the crazy tales that are being spun around the other people playing the game.
That sounds great. I'll have to give that a go.
And it's a lot of fun. It's kind of hard to find now, but you can find if you look for it. But It's very an acquired taste because it's not a competitive game at all. It's just it's like one of those make your own adventure books, but like think of a 5-player make your own adventure book. That's pretty much what it is. So a lot of fun.
The make your own adventure books. I mean, I can remember, as a young kid getting into those, and they just brought sort of gaming alive, didn't they? Really, I mean, I was reading the book more than sort of storytelling, but I can still remember like segments of those books and how excited I get. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, those kind of predated computer games a little bit, and so so that's I think computer games kind of took away the magic of those a little bit because if you remember like the early video games, like think about Zork and stuff, that's what they were, right? Pick up the shovel, turn left, So video games kind of replaced them a little bit, but they were so cool for their time.
Yeah. Remember the Hobbit video game and all those type of things, like Thorin sits down and thinks of gold or sings about gold. That was it. All those really simple text adventures.
Oh yeah, Infocom. Yeah.
But again, that was all about using your imagination more than anything, wasn't it? I mean, just playing a game and just using your imagination to fill in the gaps, which you don't get anymore. It's all there on a plate for you, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. But that's the cool thing about the games now, though. And I think that's why RPGs have been so successful and still are successful. But so many of the other games we talked about today, too, they're just, people still love to use their imagination. And, and it's fun to watch a really realistic-looking sci-fi movie or play a realistic fantasy video game. But there's something about just sitting down together and all having the same vision in your head from this one story that happened on a table, whether it's a board game or a card game or an RPG.
Yeah, it's something we'll never lose. I mean, it's something primeval about that. The fact that everyone would just gather around and listen to a story, whether it be around the fireplace or sat in a pub or in Dunkin' Donuts, wherever you are, and just listening to a story. And I think we've sort of forgot about it, and then all of a sudden it's come back because I've certainly noticed in the last 4 or 5 years the resurgence in role-playing games, whereas they did die away, sort of towards the end of the 90s when the computer games became really strong. But now they're back, and I think they're going to they are stronger than ever with really good systems now.
They really are, and you're right. And I think that's a great resurgence, and I love to see the storytelling in all these games, and it's just a fun experience, and it makes it even. That it brings the social element back that that you kind of lose in some of the video games. So it's nice to get down with your friends and just sit down and have a bowl of pretzels and just tell stories together. Whether it's a board game or an RPG or whatever.
Yeah, I don't like pretzels.
Well, have another donut, Owen.
There you go.
Yeah, I will. That'd be lovely.
Well, that great Welsh invention.
Yes, indeed. Well, Owen, thank you so much for joining us here at Dunkin' Donuts and taking the time to wax poetic, if you will, about
taking the time to cross the Atlantic.
Yes, very kind of you. So we're looking forward to. So thanks for joining us on Lost Chapters, and we're looking forward to having you on the main show here next week.
I'm looking forward to it,
and we can't wait to have you on to talk about who knows what we'll talk about. It'll be fun.
It'll be He'll probably have something to do with stories.
It will, I'm sure.
Yeah, it might do. It's just a tad.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.